I am truly confident.
But how does all of this go down with Shionte?
I mostly agree with everything they were saying. The only thing I wouldn't agree with was the $15 minimum wage. Yes, I do believe that there should be a $15 minimum wage, but just not so soon because we're still trying to recover from this pandemic, and I feel like that would put strain on the small businesses that are barely making it. But everything else, the $1,400 stimulus check, the boost in unemployment, it's going to be for the better.
Not all businesses have struggled in the pandemic. Rakesh Tamabatula is the CEO of California-based Quick Brands, who make healthcare and cleaning products as well as PPE. As the demand for these products grew, so did his workforce, from 30 employees a year ago to 200 now. Unlike Shionte, he supports the immediate increase of the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour.
In the short term, it would be very burdensome for us, but I think that's something necessary for us to improve the lifestyle of the average American. It is absolutely necessary.
However, Rakesh, like many other entrepreneurs, is looking beyond the immediate consequences of the pandemic when he thinks about his future priorities.
Right now, we are one of the largest producers of disinfectant wipes in the US, and our imports of the disinfectant wipe materials totals to about 36% of the import from China. Several industries like these have been ignored, and we have shipped them overseas. The new administration, I hope, sets some long-term plans for bringing these industries back to the US.
And what about Mr. Biden's commitment, which, to be fair, other presidents had been saying in the past, that he will invest quite a significant sum of money on America's ailing infrastructure? Is that something that you think is really important and it's holding you back?
I think that's absolutely important, and I can say that just from our experience. We actually just moved out of a large facility here in Southern California and actually have expanded into a newer facility, twice the size. The previous facility, it was lacking basic electricity. So we were lacking the electricity from the grid to be operational to the scale we needed to. That was just because of the city lacking the basic infrastructure for industries like ours.
The fact that a business in a very developed state like California struggled for access to electricity might come as a surprise to some people outside of the US. But the truth is, America's roads and bridges have been creaking for decades. 4 years ago, President Trump promised to focus on the issue, but poor infrastructure still continues to impose large costs on the US economy. Joe Biden has said that it's time to stop talking about infrastructure and finally start building it. David Taylor, the president of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association, believes that for his members, this issue should be a big focus for the new administration.
We also need to continually upgrade our telecommunications infrastructure, especially broadband. Pennsylvania is the most rural state in America in that we have the largest number of people who live in small towns and farmsteads and villages. And so I would argue that deploying rural broadband is the next step following on the rural electrification effort of 100 years ago. This is especially critical for manufacturing because there's been a new industrial revolution. Now, the combination of high degrees of connectivity has enabled manufacturers to actually use machine learning to track your manufacturing process. This is going to be the new standard. It is becoming the new standard for manufacturing. And so, people talk about the digital divide. The stakes of that digital divide have just gotten much steeper.
Joe Biden managed to flip the battleground state of Pennsylvania, but analysts thought it was more of a protest vote against Trump than a huge amount of enthusiasm for Mr. Biden, who grew up in the northeastern city of Scranton. David Taylor echoes some of those doubts.
Unfortunately, he's wrong on a number of major points. Certainly, he's wrong on business taxes. He's attacking the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 and would move us backwards when it comes to America's international business tax competitiveness.
President Trump sold his 2017 tax cuts as rocket fuel for the economy, arguing that freeing up money for the wealthy would allow them to hire more workers, pay better wages, and invest more. The tax savings, in other words, would trickle down from the rich to everyone else. But Joe Biden and congressional Democrats have signaled plans to raise taxes on wealthy individuals and corporations. This is just one of the many policies that Mr. Biden sees as a vehicle to address America's structural inequalities that the pandemic has laid bare.
George Floyd! Save me! George Floyd! Save me! George Floyd! Save me! No justice!
The Black Lives Matter movement became an international phenomenon in 2020. Protesters took to the streets in cities across the US in the aftermath of the police killing of George Floyd, a black man in Minneapolis, all with the same message: Black Lives Matter. Many experts argue that these protests have been as much about race as they are about class. As Mr. Biden faces the huge challenge of leading a deeply divided nation, will he be able to reverse some of the inequalities that make many Americans feel left behind? Robert Reich, professor of public policy at Berkeley and President Clinton's first Labor Secretary, thinks the route to equality starts with tackling the way politics is financed in the US.
It was very difficult, for example, to do as much as Bill Clinton wanted to do, to invest in the well-being of the American workers, to expand labor rights, when you had large corporations who have financed so many of the campaigns of so many members of Congress, saying to their Congress people, no, we don't want that. We want you to stop that. And that happened again and again.
What would you say to those people who are saying Joe Biden is very much an establishment guy, former vice president? Most of the people he's chosen so far are people who were advisors to previous presidents. What would you say to those people who are saying he is not the man who is going to be revolutionary?
They may be underestimating Joe Biden, and they may not understand the times we're living in. The Democratic establishment is at a different place than it was before Donald Trump. I think many people in the Democratic Party, maybe many business leaders and financial leaders, have seen now the direct consequences of ignoring such a large segment of the American population. They see the results of a system that has got off track. It's not good for anybody. It's bad for the establishment. It's also bad for the country. Some of his advisors, I know, are whispering in his ear this very thing. Be bold with regard to fiscal policy. Make major investments in infrastructure, in public health, in education. Those investments will pay off, not only in terms of future growth, but also in terms of generating more jobs.
Do you think that there is big fear that he might be undone by the world that we live in now, this very difficult economic situation that we're all finding ourselves in because of the pandemic?
I don't think that's his biggest problem, frankly. I think the pandemic is going to end. His greatest problem is a Republican Party, many members of whom are living in a counterfactual universe. I mean, they are still under the trance of Donald Trump. This is not your regular Republican Party. This is not your regular politics. This is not your regular assumed system of two parties hashing it out.
Former US Labour Secretary Robert Reich ending Ivana Davidovich's report. When Joe Biden placed his hand on the family Bible and swore to uphold the Constitution on Wednesday, he was surrounded by former living presidents, all except one, his predecessor, Donald Trump. The businessman turned president left Washington earlier in the day, barely able to concede defeat in his final speech.
I will always fight for you. I will be watching, I will be listening, and I will tell you that the future of this country has never been better. I wish the new administration great luck and great success. So just a goodbye. We love you. We will be back in some form. So have a good life. We will see you soon. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Whilst the Bidens won't have received the customary tour of the White House from the departing family, Trump insists that he did leave the new man in charge a thriving economy. Let's take a look now at some of his big moments.
As I conclude my term as the 45th President of the United States, I stand before you truly proud of what we have achieved together. Republicans have created the best economy in the history of our country. The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord, North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury.